Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, co-founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, musicians, artists, you name it, in the world of crypto and blockchain globally. And I have an amazing guest today. I interviewed a fellow from his company from Valence back in June, and I'm happy to have this man on my show. His name is Adam Helfgott. He's a co-founder of Valence. Adam, welcome.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's really wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. So let's kick things off. First question is what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think it's a logical background. For this podcast, I'll go a little deeper than just like my pure professional history, but I'll keep it kind of brief in the sense that I've been like like one of those kids in the I'm 47 now. In like the 90s, I was like part of the whole like 2600 scene, hacker scene, all that kind of stuff, going to New York City and the various meetings there and doing all sorts of fun things there, the Secret Service all running around and all that kind of stuff. And and I was always on the kind of like forward edge of like what like where like technology can be pushed, and also to kind of like what's what's real out there, and I was also really fascinated and drawn towards networks. I was early like BBS user well before the internet and all things like that. And I was always kind of on the hacking freaking side. Always found that stuff fascinating. And at some point in my senior year of college, I had a experience that led me to think that, hey, I should probably just with this internet thing blowing up, let's apply this knowledge to like building companies and things like that, because now would be the time to do that. And so I had a job at Lockheed Martin out of school and started a startup with a college roommate called eCamp, photo news and email for summer camps. And that went really, really well. And we had a big social network for the kids afterwards, like we had about 1 million users. And that was called My eCamp. We rebranded to the first iteration of a company called Madhive, which is a company that I'm just transitioning from right now, which is the second iteration of it, which is an adtech company. But I've always kind of been an entrepreneur at heart, a CTO / product builder. I'm a pretty terrible like mathematical programmer, but I'm like a good prototyper where I can and a good communicator with like how things should work kind of mathematically, and stuff that goes well beyond my ability to be able to like functionally create the algorithms themselves, but I kind of like know how they should work of sorts. And so I happened upon Bitcoin pretty early on, in early days of like when it was on like Reddit posts and you can build your own miners and things like that. I was way too I didn't get involved then right away because I was building this company called Lookbooks and just kind of kept pushing it off. But I was reading about it and fascinated by it, and started building things using crypto early on, but more from like I learned how to trade and build algorithms there, in the crypto markets in the early days rather than the stock market, things like that. But I've always wanted to like use distributed ledger technology in like what new products could be created that couldn't be created before. Every time there's a new database tech, new things can be made, and it took me a long time to really understand, how not to use a blockchain database for something that SQL can do probably better. Like how do we, and so like smart contracts, things like that. But like what are like what's the smallest thing that this is like where it's really, really different? Because outside of the public mainnet, trust everything else on a blockchain is kind of not nearly as good as other technology that we have out there that do similar things. And so I built this company called Madhive. It's an ad tech company, and originally raised a bunch of money from like Digital Currency Group and people like that to kind of restructure the ad tech market on blockchain and tokenized and get rid of fraud and all these kind of things. And the biggest learning I had there is that the industry just doesn't want it yet. They don't want to like change these big major media companies and everything else, they're not ready for a complete disruption, especially from a crypto company and the technology that's associated with scams and frauds and all the other kind of things. There's regulatory problems and public companies can't like buy these assets and all sorts of things like that. But the technology is great and we use it a lot internally. Madhive got really big. We had a transaction with Goldman Sachs back in June, and I left the CEO post there to kind of full-time work on a project that I've been working on for many years, where the initial token we developed for Madhive, the core tech of that is about basically provenance and being able to do really, really fast data matching and then attribute value in a situation, and then understand all the pieces that went into that value creation, so that whether it's money or other things can be remitted back to those source things and create new incentives for things that are hard to scale. And we've been trying to figure out how to use this core piece of technology in new ways. And I think we've kind of figured that out at this current iteration of Valence. We've pivoted a lot while building the core tech, from during the NFT boom and working with the Chicago Cubs and and famous artists and things like that, to kind of do not so much NFT sales, but how do we prove that that the owner is the owner, with certificate authorities and things like that. And so what we really moved to now, though, is solving problems in big markets for data exchange, in order for large companies, especially in healthcare, to facilitate new product development. That's really hard today. Number one problem is that FDA approval takes you have a certain amount of time, and in order before your patent expires. And so so if you can speed up FDA approval time, people's lives will be saved. And and there's a lot of there's a lot of good to be done. It's a hard problem, and we think an idea that uses a public mainnet can help that happen. What's funny, though, is that the world still the enterprise world isn't quite ready for or care if provenance is on a public mainnet. We believe in the future, as the stuff that we're doing scales, it'll have to be, because auditing and companies like E&Y and all the other audit firms just won't be able to take on the load, and it'll be too expensive to prove. And then the idea of the public mainnet can kind of automatically solve a lot of problems. And so we're building our technology on at the core level on a distributed ledger. And there's a token involved and everything else, but basically for future proofing our idea as we gain scale in kind of the enterprise world, with just a regular old piece of enterprise software that does a few special things. So
I have some follow-ups. I told you if you said anything remarkable during your intro, I would have follow-ups, and I have 3 of them. So before we get into Valence rebranding, I want to talk about your history of rebranding. Usually when I see a company rebrand or restructure, I'm like, they're being affected by the bear market. But you talked about restructuring and rebranding since the 90s. So you obviously look at something, you have a knack of looking at something and figuring out what worked, what hasn't worked. What do you look for when you rebrand, and how has your success been, and what you've your core there, your strength?
Yeah. So there's I don't know who made this quote, or whatever it is, but basically there's entrepreneurs and there's artists, right? And I have an idea, and I think I know how a facilitation might happen, and that'll kind of work a product idea. And when I go into market, that either gets a little traction or it doesn't. Usually the core idea is still correct, but the implementation is wrong, or it's just completely sideways. And my art is creating something that kind of changes the way a current system works. That's what I really like doing. And in the context of eCamp and the summer camps, the thing back then that was really novel is that summer camp is about having kids create a coming of age experience when they're away from home, kind of like, you know, what first year of college does for a lot of people when they're away. But that happens when you're 12 in this like controlled environment. And so if you create an internet Web 2 product that, you know, changes that, you know, camps won't buy it because it changes their value proposition, you know. And so we developed like a system that would like let email work, but it would only like dial up to the, just back in dial-up days, back to the, you know, dial up like once a night and back and forth. And, you know, email would get printed out and there'd be a barcode where the kids can write back. And, you know, so we like developed this product that like facilitated the intention of, you know, our customers really, really well. It took a while to kind of like get there and get that. So like for me, like rebranding is taking like, you know, a core idea and then working and then finding like a customer or a group of customers or consortium that really believes in us as a team to like change and facilitate. And instead of in these initial early customers are partners and sometimes investors, sometimes not, but where it's okay for us to fail together. And when I can like work and find with one of those, I've had a number of failures in my past. It's because I didn't have that. And that's all the successes I've had, the stronger and bigger that partner is, and the more I can like develop trust with them and really do good by them, whether it's like showing up, you know, to a corporate office with a box of donuts every morning and sitting with their employees and watching their workflows and, you know, what can I make more efficient, get deeper and deeper in there. You know, to you know, just you know, a small company that wants to be on the cap table and maybe have an outsized return on that investment because they, you know, they can participate in growing the company with using the product. You know, that's where I've had success, and that's usually where like rebranding or refocusing happens from like a core idea.
Got it. Okay. The other two fellows, I'm gonna put them elsewhere later on in the podcast. I'm gonna get into the first main question I have for you now. Is we're talking about rebranding. I want to stick with that. Is Valence has recently rebranded, right? Why are you rebranding Valence now, and what is your vision for the company's future?
Sure. You know, so one, our like kind of last iteration of like pushing this technology. So the core idea of Valence has always been around this like value attribution data enablement like methodology where we can like have like deep provenance on a system, but it has a we've been running something with Verizon for a long time where it's like kind of battle stake news where they can like every time they put out a piece of PR public communication, it kind of goes on this like Ethereum sidechain we have hashed and blah blah blah. And it's like this interesting algorithm that it could be like quotes and this and that where they can kind of attribute back to that, hey, we said this or we didn't say it. But then every time they update what those articles, you know, they can't take something back because it's like on this public mainnet of sorts. But what's interesting is that like there's requirements in the enterprise where they have to where they have to be able to expire data and a whole bunch of other things that like have like from a regulatory point of view. And so we have this like methodology, and the way the system works is that, you know, there's garbage collection and all sorts of stuff on our chain. You know, so the idea that like it's indelible forever, that was like, you know, isn't actually true. You can prove that something was there, but we can't prove what that was if it expires and things like that. And so, you know, like what more can we do with that? And like, so during, you know, so the idea was that we'd always have this like enterprise deep product, like, hey, like, can we use this technology to become kind of like the internet's user database at the end of the day is like, you know, the big vision. And how do we get there? And like, so, you know, like during the, you know, pre-FTX collapse, when everything was like, you know, fun and exciting, we're like, okay, like, you know, we know the Chicago Cubs owner, we know a whole bunch of famous artists, like let's, you know, like use that and kind of get in there. So we had this big consumer focus and like artist focus. And it turns out, you know, working with sports teams and everything else, it's really difficult to make. We did some interesting activations at Wrigley Field where, you know, like, you know, where you can like walk around and collect things around the stadium and around that with businesses and things like that and create these like stadium products. But it's not really a big business. I mean, that's like and like we're interested in like creating something that could have massive scale. And so the original branding of Valence was like, let's prove this tech out while kind of building this big idea we had behind the scenes. And then post FTX, all this other kind of stuff. Like if our end goal is to work with major enterprises and everything else, I kind of want to stay as far away from things that might be associated with, scams and NFT, stuff like that, because like that's actually not what we're looking to do. And like I want to de-risk on my side, any no's. And so, the rebrand there is like, hey, no, we're actually this core piece of interesting technology. And it's safe to work with us.
Interesting you said that. So I was at a party this past weekend, Friendsgiving party, and talked to a person there. He has a job, one of those, the office and stuff like that, where he's saying finance is supposed to be boring. And I was like, you know what? Over the past year and a half, I've discovered that's supposed to be boring. And you said pre-FTX was fun and exciting, and it's supposed to be boring. Do you agree? Do you subscribe to that idea, or what do you think?
Yes and no, right? I think it's supposed to be boring in the context that, like, at the end of the day, the things that power finance are, tax dollars and, like infrastructure and like people's livelihoods and the pension funds and all these kind of things. And like, it's like the amount of consideration and care and trust and like love in a way that needs to go into actually doing well by the country that you're in, the people that you're serving, and all this kind of stuff. It has to be like at such a high level of responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, that the amount of effort involved to have that compliance is like real annoying work. It's like boring work, that side of it. And so I think it is boring there because like you can't be taking like YOLO trades on like people's livelihoods, and like and so I think there's like boredom there. But as far as like, what good can we do, inside these environments, and how do we like play within these walls and like and innovate there? I think that part is really, really exciting, and that's kind of how I see that.
Got it. That makes sense. I agree with you. So you have at Valence, there's for you on your website, it says you have 5 key areas of focus, right? Onboarding, monitoring, querying, valuation, and monetization. I'm wondering how you do all of those and which one you think you do best.
Yeah, good question. So we do all of them well, because I'll explain to you, kind of what we're trying to do, right? And so like we're looking at like healthcare, rare disease, drug discovery, for example, right? And so right now, like the idea of like personalized medicine is like very, very niche, doesn't really exist. But I think we can all agree that, in the future, at some point, medicine will be personalized the same way when you go into a shoe store. There's many different sizes. Right now, you go into, a pharmacy and it's like, do you want the child size or the adult size? It'd be like going to a shoe store and saying, do you want large or small? And like that doesn't really work that well, to a large degree. And to develop personalized medicine based on your genetics, to get FDA approval and things like that, is the amount of data required becomes like orders of magnitude larger. And because now you need sample sizes of people with certain genetic traits, with healthcare records that work with that are the same, and then you need people that are the opposite of that, and you need everything in between. And so basically, to get like clinical trials done is like near impossible in the amount of time you need before your patent expires on that. And I think that's like why we're not seeing a lot of like niche rare disease development outside of well, even like the big ones, like like you have people like Michael J. Fox Foundation and things like that working really hard on that. And there's a lot of collaboration happening between the data that patient advocacy groups creates, and then how does like a company like Pfizer and everyone in between use that to develop drugs. There's still a lot of like distributed data problems where there's like healthcare records all over the world. There's genetic genomes all over the place. Connecting all that's really, really hard, expensive, and time consuming. And so there's a lot of companies and marketplaces that are like designing these federated data networks now, where it becomes this like on-prem solution that allows their data to be queried in like in a federated manner, and kind of all like kind of put together in a non-centralized way. It's like kind of crypto adjacent, I guess. And really what we're working on is the kind of like PayPal for that system, right? And so like, so it's like there's all these like marketplaces that are happening kind of but there's the incentive system is kind of misaligned, right? And so, an interesting example is that, during COVID and when what was the second variant that came out that killed us?
On Delta?
Yeah, the Omicron. When Omicron came out, that was discovered basically by a bunch of African nations together. And instead of them being like praised and winning economically from like giving that data to the world, they actually like immediate travel bans and a whole bunch of other sanctions happened. And so like the incentive for there is zero incentive, negative incentive now for countries to share their COVID data because of things like that happening, which hurts all of us. And the same thing in a lot of other places. But in a system where if like researchers in the United States are using data from a company there, like a government somewhere else, the attribution and it can kind of be tracked. And also there could be like bounties and or just usage for that data, as well as when discoveries are made, certain things like happen, and so, if all the governments got together and said, if you participate in finding the next variant before it spreads, there's $1 billion there, and and that could be very, that kind of changes the way things work, which allows, an FDA approval or other things for drug discovery, if Pfizer can put out a new drug faster, they'll for sure give up almost like an enterprise value of that new drug in order to get that data faster. So like 5% of profits go somewhere else in that way there. So really what Valence does is building like a data architecture to kind of like map the reality of these flows to basically have higher transaction velocity of data exchange. So in this level, like data is the new oil kind of thing. What's the mechanism in federated networks that allow that to actually be true? Because oil has value, but like right now, data does and it doesn't. A lot of it's because it's really hard to understand the contextual value of it. So like one question of a bunch of data, one record might be worth $1 billion to one person, but worth 10 cents to somebody else. And so we're building this like overlay on top of query engines, whether it's machine learning, like to understand like, hey, what training data do you went into creating this answer, and then we can kind of weight this training data was needed to for 90% of the result of sorts, and then basically a negotiation can happen between both sides, to power that. So if there's $1 billion drug being discovered, there's $100 million goes back to the data producers. So that's basically what we're building.
Got it. So I'm going to go to my second follow-up question from your intro. Talk about rare diseases, right? Tomorrow, I hate to have the focus on me on a podcast, so I'll be brief. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow, I go for my 5th chemo infusion for a rare disease which I have that affects 2 in a million.
Oh wow!
There's a drug right now that's in the 3rd phase of the FDA approval that was supposed to come out months ago. Yep. Supposed to come out in August. Yep. Next month. How do we speed up these FDA approval times so that we can save lives?
Yeah, and so a lot of it just is accessing people with the right genetics, and so we have a partner, I can't name it quite yet, but it's a data marketplace, and what you just talked about, so it's just like hitting me now, is like that's like I built Madhive, and and that was had a really great outcome for me, but but like where I really want to focus is on like solving these kind of problems, and like a lot of the partner I'm talking about, the founder of that child has things that in the same type of thing that you're talking about, like, right, and like and like and a lot of the other researchers and PhDs on the project, they're working for the same reason, that they want to like fix this like bureaucratic problem of sorts, and it's not, and it's also a scientific problem where how do we put all this data together? And so they're developing this like federated data software where they can onboard data and ask questions of that data. And they've been working with Google on creating standards to have that systemized and all this other kind of stuff. And what's missing is like an incentive layer, so that like the small children's hospital and Spokane can like hey, if they like install this on-prem piece of software, the procurement group there, might start seeing that like, they might be able to create, $10 million a year in new revenue passively. And so that's the part we're building is that part. And so really speeding up FDA approval is really, can I get the studies done on clinical trials like faster? And so just aggregating the sheer humans and the data around it is what takes years and years and years. And a lot of it is just like finding the humans to like say yes and do it. And that's like what one side of it is like, how do you, if you're saying it's 2 and 2 million, like you said, right? For you, like, it's hard to find a lot of you to like do that, right? Like where, and that's part of the problem there. And the FDA and everyone else, there's a lot of other nuances that, I'm not talking about here, how they get that done, but it's still like years and years and years. But if you can like present the data to the FDA, it's about longitudinal data as well. So, like that, not just one-off, but like over time, like check on this information, things like that. And so how do you, get a system that's trusted enough where the FDA will approve the data aggregation that's happening, and that the algorithms that are like connecting identity A, B, and C between all these databases, that these are the same person, that's all like scientific and statistically valid to like the way that they need it. That's what's kind of missing. And it's not so much, and so right now all that's kind of like done by hand, which is just slow. And like, so like cross-market identity matching, or in the crypto speak of just cross-chain identity, all that, like a lot of the technology has been like built to like solve the problem we're talking about, but it's like putting it all together and implementing it, productizing it, having a team that can get behind the firewall at Pfizer and Merck and all these other kind of places, as well as the other side that takes 5-6 years to get that done, and a whole bunch of, and that's, to get all that kind of stuff done, it just takes a while. And we think the next couple of years we're kind of, that's all going to happen, because this work has been happening behind the scenes for a while. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just hard. That's all. And
so the way to authenticity is, well, blockchain does it automatically, but actually it's in the data capture process.
Well, yeah, like blockchain does a lot of the automatic provenance and a whole bunch of other, and audit detection and stuff like that. There's like a misnomer that a lot of the normies, the non-blockchain people have, that like, and I think it's just from bad branding of crypto in the beginning. If it's on a blockchain, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means that someone put it on a blockchain. And so like what we have is like, we don't verify or validate data, but we verify the entities that are putting data onto chain. Actually, it's they're not even putting data on a chain. They're putting like a hash record that we can like kind of match back to another database. And then the privacy as well as access controls and things like that are in our system. That's on chain. And then, but essentially you like, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but that's what we're trying to really solve is like kind of putting all this stuff together so that we can build new products that are enterprise ready. And we don't tell customers that this is a crypto network and blah, blah, blah. Like, we're using blockchain, as I said earlier, specifically for this like public mainnet auditability like feature that it can have. Oh yeah, so that we have like a certificate authority that no one owns, that's on the mainnet, so that like Pfizer's data or the Children's Hospital or this cancer research facility, they all have a private key and a public key that like one centralized company, whether it's us or someone else, doesn't control. And that like, if we're in the middle of hundreds of billions of dollars of transactions, we don't want to even have the ability to like mess with that, because there's financial incentive for us to like make someone else's data a little better in the algorithm someone else's if we have an outsized like vig on that transaction, right? And we just want to remove that like ability from a system like this, because we think that's how it'll scale. Because that at the enterprise level, that's that becomes a concern. And so how do you have a Pfizer and a Merck and other major competitive companies working on the same system? And like and I think like a public mainnet solves that.
One of my concerns with data is, and you see this more in the social media side, where people post, videos on social media. They give you a clip,
Yeah.
right? But they don't give you context. See something happening that you might disagree with, but you don't know what the situation is or the context behind it is. So what do you see as dangerous in today's world with the use of malicious data or malicious videos or clips or even like pieces of information that are maliciously presented? How do we solve that?
Yeah, I think, it's like, like kind of like the architecture of what I'm talking about here, the product can be developed where, one, if a clip isn't like audited back to its source, right? There's not like a little stamp that's like a public thing, the same way SSL works. Like, you don't transact on a site that doesn't have SSL, don't like ingest this piece of content or post it if it doesn't have this like link back to where it comes from. And then what can happen is that there could be other products and things like that where, what happens internally at Twitter, or did happen, I guess, I think Elon just turned it off, this like content moderation thing where, hey, if the same piece of like crazy content is being distributed by these like 700,000 accounts, we should look into that and maybe post one of those little bubbles that says this is wrong. I think a lot of that could be crowdsourced, incentive based there, with a system like this. And then if content just doesn't have a source, and then you can say, so if it's like an AI video of Biden saying something bizarre, that can get tracked back to the source, that might like be a whole bunch of craziness that isn't quite real. I think where it really goes into the future, and this is what we're doing on the genomic side, is that the camera that takes that video and things like that will have a cryptographic chip in it that will basically be signing the video it creates. And if that video gets modified or changed, like you can like figure that out really easily, in an automated way. And I think that's really where it's going. That's what we have on the genomic side, is that the sequencer does have a cryptographic chip that does validate the data that's coming off of it, and that if like things change in that sequence, it doesn't hash back to reality, and it's thrown out. Like the FDA needs that, right? And so I think news and consumption needs that, especially like it's really interesting, like this like rage bait stuff that we see all the time. It's unhealthy to like be this angry all the time, I think, and people get addicted to that. And and there's all this research, like you get angry 50 times a day or this kind of stuff, like I think that causes like health damage and other problems for people, not just like voting crazy people into power, but I think it's like physically hurting people like over time, like having those chemicals released in your body consistently. And so like it like having companies and organizations that like use that emotional output in order to generate views and money is should be regulated to a degree. Like it's abusive, and so how do you and I think we're probably a decade away from that like actually be able to like happen. So what's going to happen in this decade, who the hell knows.
Got it. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because you're probably the only person who I've had on who could speak intelligently to this. I used to, in my corporate days, I worked in a SQL shop at AIG for 5 years, developer as a guy who worked between the C-suite and the programmers building stuff, right? Um, so you said early on blockchain versus SQL.
Yeah.
You know, people don't want to talk about SQL and crypto, but um, there is a difference. And how can we move from a SQL shop environment, which is Web 2, to a blockchain environment, and how can we get these companies and enterprises to embrace the transition from SQL to blockchain if there's going to be a transition? What do you see as the strengths in both, and what do you think wins in the long run?
So, I look at it a little differently. Is that like these are tools to achieve goals, right? And so SQL databases do certain things that, like the same way, like I wouldn't build like a if I was like going to make a Facebook clone, I wouldn't like choose like CSV text files as my database, right? And like and like if and I also wouldn't choose a blockchain database to build a Facebook competitor as well, because like one does a Facebook competitor truly need in the early stages of this number one feature, because a public mainnet audit trail, is that the number one thing it needs, right? No, I don't think so. And that's the number one thing in my book that that blockchain delivers. And that's Bitcoin's big value point, is that I could have one of something. And I can prove that with this like audit log that there's the way it works, and UTXOs and things like that. And so, I think what we're going to start seeing, and we do see it a lot, and we're doing it, and a lot of other people are too, is like, how do I have a combination of different database technology to build products that could not have existed before? Because now I have this new thing, this public mainnet thing that lets me transact in this like passive autonomous way, where I can connect an authenticated wallet. So I think like what we'll start seeing is like, it would be great to set up a bank account at a bank in like 19 seconds, because I have like an authenticated wallet somewhere else, and there's a token, someone already did all the KYC on me, and now that KYC, and I have a token that represents my KYC, and like Chase Bank can just pay a small fee to that company that originally KYC'd me, and now they don't have to do it again, so having like public mainnet architecture for like humanity to like make everything easier, it'll be great. But Chase isn't going to develop the entire mobile banking app on blockchain. Like that would take, well, one, we'd have, that take years and years and years to rebuild everything. And it's the wrong tech. Like I wouldn't build a skyscraper out of styrofoam, but styrofoam exists, so, it's just more like, how does this technology get integrated to make better products? And that's where we're kind of stuck. And I think tokenized networks and wallets, it's still going to be a while. I think Apple and Google and all these having a wallet at scale for like humans is really hard. That's like the hardest problem to solve. I think the closest thing we have now that I see is Google Pay and Apple Pay, that people you just walk around New York City, 80% of the population is using Apple Pay, and that's it's not a crypto wallet, but it's a wallet. And like people get it. Like I have these my airline ticket and this and that and that. Like it's all like people know how to use it. It's the same UX, and it's actually better UX than most wallets. And I think what if like Apple adopts a public mainnet strategy where I can have a KYC thing in my wallet, and I can then authenticate that to sign up for a bank account, or if I can do a loan against my assets, that I have provability, because I have I own. This is what we were doing in the old Valence, is that I own this Picasso, I own this thing, like this company validated and verified it and all this kind of stuff. Can I have an Apple Pay credit card that is borrowing money against the assets I have, and things like that? Can I set all that up kind of instantly, the way I can do a MakerDAO loan with ETH, would be fantastic for the world. And and giving, people access to liquidity. And, can I take 10% of my paycheck and if I have a good job record and good LinkedIn, will someone give me a 7% interest rate on that? Will Starbucks just give me a credit line because I have a good job? And, that's where public mainnets will come into play. And I don't want one company mediating that information because it can get abused. That's kind of how I see these products evolving.
Thank you. That's a really good way to look at it. You did say something else that you said UX.
Yeah.
So, when I was in that corporate shop, I would, I worked with the CFOs and I worked with the programmers and found out the specs, right? And in crypto, we have this thing where you're crypto native, and a lot of crypto natives don't want people with SQL experience working there because, they don't want the old views, right? But I think you need a combination, right, of crypto native and experience in order to develop an intelligent network of networks, right?
Sure.
How do you empower an intelligent network of networks, and why is that necessary?
Yeah. So, and I try to reduce. I've been in and I said before, I've been in this crypto space for a while, right? And I was ICO round one, traveling all around the world, blah blah blah. Did all this stuff, and at the end of the day, the concepts that we talk about in crypto, aren't that far off than sci-fi examples that Arthur C. Clarke talked about, in the 1960s, right? And so if we kind of remove ourselves from the crypto jargon and more think about hey, what's possible in product and society, the technical doohickeys that make crypto work, whether it's zero knowledge proofs or this or that, are just these pieces of functionality that do a thing to facilitate a thing. And I think a lot of engineers, that are coming up, and especially a lot of really, really engineers that haven't really caught the crypto bug from a point of view of oh, it's going to change the world, blah, 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 but just see this as tools to solve a problem. And so I think people learning, let's just take the hype out of crypto. And it's just more these are amazing tools, computer science tools that are incredibly complex. These are network tools. You have companies like Flashbots and other Mev and doing these fascinating work on what's happening there. And so where can developers and product designers just start when they really grok and really understand what these doohickeys do in order to facilitate new ways of doing things. And so whether that's a token or a token abstraction, if for us, our customers are never going to buy a token, but because we just don't think the world is ready for that, and we don't think it's worth the sales effort to push them to do that. And what's a lot easier is that, hey, I don't have them pay their own Google Cloud bill at Madhive either. I pay that bill, and so we use we chose to use a crypto database, a public mainnet, to put a bunch of information out there so that we can use it to make our products. I pay that bill with tokens instead of paying Google a BigQuery bill, and I get paid in dollars on an invoice, whether from our customers, and I pay my bill, and some of that bill is buying ETH, and that's fine. And one of my crypto goals, and put my crypto hat on, the crypto hipster hat on. I want to bring tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in liquidity into Ethereum that is not speculative in nature, that is required to have a product that is used at scale by the world's major corporations, and that's my crypto goal, because I think that's actually something that crypto really needs, that'll start turning heads for what I just described, where product developers and designers that want to build valuable companies can see oh, there's I get it, if I want this feature or this ability, I can get it done really easily with crypto, and I don't actually need to involve tokens at the consumer level, and that's kind of how I see it.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I want to thank you very much for your time today. This has been an amazing conversation. I love speaking with you. And I have one final question, I guess.
Mhm.
It's gonna be easy. It's what is how can people find out more information about you, about Valence, about what you do? How can they reach out or contact you if they'd like to? How can they do that?
Yeah, sure. Well, the current website, we're going to keep it's, the ideas and everything out there. It's pretty fluid. Like we're an early stage startup. It's not it's like it's a pretty. Our team is fairly like mature. Like it's not our first rodeo at all. We're pretty fluid. So like you'll keep seeing changes there, and we'll publish them on on Twitter and things like that as we get there. As we start scaling the company itself and everything else, it'll get a little more institutionalized. But right now we're in this kind of ragtag stage. And like, if someone's interested or has, feel free to DM on Twitter. You can reach out to me. It's my name, I'm Helfgott, or X now, whatever you want to call it. And and happy to, I'm Adam at Valence get Valence.xyz, and like, it's like you can find me. And same with anyone else on the team. So
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
cool. Thank you so much. That's been great.